It is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has announced his budget, which included a 2% decrease in national insurance, which could be worth an average of £450 to you. But the question is it enough? How much of your hard-earned money do you get to keep? Does the budget encourage investment, jobs, innovation and economic growth? I'll be discussing all of that and more. This includes increased spending on the NHS, the cost of net zero and a new Muslim war memorial. Most importantly, a news item launched today, Vox Populi, Vox Day. Well, I'll be speaking to you about how you feel about the budget and whether you think it cuts the mustard. State of the Nation starts now. I'll be joined by my most pugnacious panel this evening, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the historian and broadcaster, Tessa Dunlop. As always, I want to hear from you. It's a crucial part of the programme. Email me, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite part of the day, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Jacob, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, all eyes were on the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, today as he delivered his spring budget. He slashed personal taxes to their lowest level in nearly 50 years, with another 2% cut in the pound in national insurance, the centrepiece of his pre-election budget. But figures suggest expected rises in council tax will wipe out any benefits felt by households. Speaking after his statement in the Commons today, Jeremy Hunt said his budget marks a big reduction in the tax bill for ordinary families.
What you see is that after a 4 percentage points cut in national insurance, there is a big reduction in the tax bill for ordinary families. And that is because the economy's turned a corner. We've stuck to the plan we have. The forecasts are much more optimistic for the economy going forward. And as Conservatives, we believe that if we bring down the tax burden, that will fire up the economy, create more jobs, more money for public services like the NHS.
So what are the key elements of other parts of the spring budget? Well, the non-dom tax status is to be scrapped and replaced by what the Chancellor calls a modern residency system. The Great British Pub will also get a boost from freeze on alcohol duty. Child benefit threshold goes up to £60,000 a year, and the 5p cut to fuel duties locked in for another 12 months. Also in the budget, the VAT registration threshold goes up from £85,000 to £90,000 a year. The pensions regulator will get new powers to make sure people get defined contributions and better value from their investments. And there's a new ISA scheme with a £5,000 yearly allowance for investments in Britain. And the NHS's IT systems will get a £3.5 million upgrade. Now, the House of Lords has once again moved to hold up the government's Rwanda bill as the Archbishop of Canterbury, a leading critic of the legislation, was told to check his white privilege. Tonight's ninth defeat follows previous setbacks this week, setting the stage for an extended battle between the Commons and the House of Lords. Downing Street says peers should work with MPs to protect innocent lives after Rishi Sunak made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership. 5 people have been arrested for spraying red paint on a government building in Scotland in a pro-Palestinian protest. The activists scaled Queen Elizabeth House in Edinburgh, replacing the Union flag with a Palestinian one. The demonstrators say the UK government is complicit in the Gaza conflict and call for a boycott of companies supporting Israel. It follows calls from Downing Street for a sustained humanitarian pause to be agreed as quickly as possible to allow the safe release of Israeli hostages and a significant increase in aid to Gaza. Let me just bring you some breaking news regarding events in Newham, East London's happening tonight. We understand a great number of fire appliances. The official word at this stage from the London Fire Brigade is that there are 35 fire engines and 175 firefighters all battling a blaze at a police station. It's in Forest Gate in the east of the city. It's just north of London City Airport. If you're watching on TV, you can see the latest pictures coming to us from the scene of the blaze, where the roof of that police station is engulfed in flames and billowing heavy smoke. The London Brigade is urging residents to avoid the area and keep windows and doors shut. We know road closures are also in place. We're still awaiting confirmation on the cause of that fire. It is, of course, going to be investigated. Any more developments on that fire of the Forest Gate Police Station in East London, and we will bring them to you. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My test for today's budget was, could it have been delivered by Rachel Reeves? Was there really going to be an important difference between what a brave, bold Conservative Chancellor would do and what a cautious, brown-eyed Socialist Chancellor would do? And yes, there was one important difference. That was the cut in national insurance, the 2% off, reducing it to 8%, and with the implication that it may be abolished altogether, which is a really very important implication and would be a fundamental change and improvement in our tax system. But overall, the budget was constrained by the way we now construct economic policy. We have deified the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, which is unfortunately useless. It gets all its forecasts wrong, as indeed the Chancellor pointed out in his budget statement, and Sir David Davis, magisterially explained in his speech on the budget later. And that means that you're making these decisions on forecasts that will turn out not to be true, and you end up making little decisions, thinking the forecasts are right, when actually the little decisions don't really matter. So I'm very much in favour of the VAT threshold being increased so that small businesses have an opportunity to grow. Businesses up and down the country turn away opportunities when it gets to February and March because they don't want to go over the VAT threshold. Taking it up to £90,000 was a good start. It cost £150 million. But that out of a £1.216 trillion budget, expenditure budget, is a rounding error. It's 0.01%. It doesn't matter. And the idea that you can make these very precise forecasts and add up little bits here and little bits there and then say we are meeting our rules actually doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. You need to look at the big picture and try and get fundamental reform, taking into account where you're starting from. And where you're starting from is that we are spending too much. 44.5% of GDP for 2023-24. The £1.216 billion that I mentioned is more than the country can sensibly afford, and it's why we've got taxation at the highest level since 1948. It isn't going to exceed it, so we won't be able to say it's the highest taxation level in the post-war period, but it's not much below. And until we look at fundamental reform, what we do nickel and diming won't make a lot of difference. What we need is economic growth, because if you can grow the pie, and this is what Nigel Lawson did, if you can grow the pie, then you have more money to spend on public services and to apply where you want, but you can also reduce the tax burden. Now, the tax burden is best applied if it's applied sensibly and uniformly. And what I don't like about this budget is the endless tinkering, the little bits here and the little bit there. So yes, I was pleased that capital gains tax on property, from which I may marginally benefit myself, just so that you know, went down, and that the Treasury and the OBR had agreed that there was a Laffer effect and that it would raise more money. But why not take it down to 20% so you only have one rate of CGT? Why carry on with this muddling? The tourism tax that we still have would boost the economy if we got rid of it. The silliness over non-DOMs. Non-DOMs contribute to the economy. They should be welcome. When we've got the OBR forecasting 350,000 immigrants coming in every year, many of whom make a negligible economic contribution, making it harder for non-DOMs, who in very small numbers make a very big contribution, is really bad policy. And then we've got all these costs of net zero and the high cost of energy, and entries in the government accounts that are bizarre. They have revenues of 11 billion for environmental charges and costs of 11 billion for environmental charges. What are we doing? Why is the government charging itself this sort of money? What is the point? We need to have a pro-growth economic policy that has simple, straightforward taxation that people can understand. Back to the Lawson model. We need to have cheap energy. We need to control government expenditure. We must get more productivity out of the public sector, which is lower now than it was pre the pandemic and has not increased since 1997. Till we get all this right, the budgets will essentially be tinkering. And yes, there was one thing that Rachel Reeves wouldn't have done, but only the one thing. As ever, let me know your thoughts, mailmog@gbnews.com. And I'm now joined by Helen Dewdney, the consumer expert, also known, I'm rather reticent about saying this, as Complaining Cow. That sounds a bit rude, Helen. I don't wish to offend you as you come on. But what do you think about the budget and how will it help consumers?
Well, there's a little bit of good news for the consumers in that, there's no movement on fuel and alcohol, so that will be of good news to some. There's a little bit in the national insurance obviously coming down, but the tax bracket is not going up, so we're not necessarily going to see that everybody's going to benefit from that. And I think a lot of consumers would have liked to have seen some of those tax rises and savings going into the local authorities.
Would you, are you more concerned about fiscal drag and the effect that's having on individuals, or giving more money to local authorities, which I certainly wouldn't do because I think local authorities are incompetent?
Well, having worked in one for some years ago, there is certainly some incompetency in councils, I would certainly agree. However, we are also seeing a lot of people suffering. We're seeing the people that are not getting the social care. We're seeing education and mental health really, right at the ends there. We're seeing children waiting for mental health diagnosis and help, for months and months, in some cases years. So actually, I do believe that some of us would actually like to see some of those services receive some funding so that they can support children and families.
And some children and families will be helped by the changes in child benefit. I mean, it's marginal, but that will help people between £50,000 and £60,000 of income.
Yeah, so we are seeing that the 50 is going up, and that I'm glad to see that the Chancellor is looking at consultation for this anomaly where a single parent household can be taxed far more on their children's on their child benefit than a household that's got two incomes coming in at $49.99 each. So it's good to see that will happen, but I still think that at the other end, where we're seeing people with disabilities, people who are vulnerable, that end down there was nothing in the budget for them.
And nothing much for people who have retired because they don't benefit from the national insurance cut.
And also, yeah, and you could say another vulnerable group. I think it's the vulnerable groups here that have really missed out in the budget.
Well, thank you very much, Helen. I'm delighted now to be joined by the economist and senior advisor and indeed founder of Capital Economics, England's most distinguished economist, Roger Bootle. Roger, thank you for coming in. What do you think the Chancellor should have done that would have had a bigger economic impact?
Well, let's start by saying that he was hemmed in by his own fiscal rules. Now, you criticise the OBR with some good reason. But I think, you can overdo that. I mean, the Tories, your party, set up the OBR.
I thought it was a good idea at the time.
Well, so did I.
Yes.
And actually, I still think to some extent it's a good idea. And I think they're in principle at the beginning to stop overspending and overborrowing by a Labour government.
And I thought it was well run by Robert Choate, who I thought knew what he was doing. I think it's less well run now. But
I'll leave it there, actually.
All right.
But given those constraints, there wasn't a great deal he could do. What's really disappointing, I think, about this government is the failure to get to grips with the fundamentals, and the fundamentals really concern government spending. You cannot get the tax burden substantially lower, which is what both you and I want, unless you control government spending. And that, I'm afraid, means cuts. And we're not having cuts. A great deal of fuss is being made about the growth of government spending being held to only 1% real. Well, that's quite low in relation to an economy that's growing fast, but we aren't growing fast. So I think, frankly, it's missing the target. Now, over and above that, given all those constraints, I agree with you. There were a series of small things he could have done. Now, why increase the VAT threshold for registration from 85 to 90,000? What do we think that's going to do? Very, very little. I mean, if it doubled it, that would have made a huge difference.
And John Redwood was asking for it to go up to, say, 150,000, which I was strongly supporting, which would really help small businesses.
I quite agree. So all this was really very disappointing. I must say, I thought it was a remarkable theatrical performance from the Chancellor. How he's got the brass neck to stand there and talk about lower taxes and reducing the debt burden, when, of course, taxes as a share of GDP are rising. And so is the debt burden. It's exactly the opposite of what he said.
Yes, indeed. And but he came up with some reason as to how he could explain it away. There were some figures on individual taxation that proved useful to him. But it seemed to me everything was being done by halves. The VAT you mentioned.
I agree.
The reducing capital gains tax on property that isn't your primary residence. And then this weird thing on stamp duty for if you're buying lots of houses. Well, you just make it lots of individual transactions, don't you?
Yeah, I thought that was very strange. But my greatest puzzle was over national insurance, because I agree with you. I think this is a good measure. I think he did the right thing to cut national insurance rather than income tax, although, of course, it does no favours to pensioners. And following on from last autumn's reduction, I thought to myself, gosh, I can now, this far in, begin to see a Conservative vision, which is, for a long time, economists have talked about wanting to merge income tax and national insurance, and it was going to be very difficult to do. Now here's the way to do it, by abolishing national insurance. But he didn't mention that as an objective.
No, well, I mentioned in my monologue that this was the vision because you mentioned it to me when we were chatting beforehand. And between us, we've had to come up with the rather brilliant vision that the Chancellor's got, but he won't tell us about it.
He won't tell us, no.
You mentioned to get taxes down, we have to cut spending. Where would you cut spending?
Well, I say cut spending. There's another way, and the two are related. We've got a very high rate of people not working in this country, many of them drawing benefits. So I think we have to tackle that first of all. And there was nothing in today's budget on that, by the way. And we've got to tackle it through a mixture, I think, of sticks and carrots. Now, of course, if you get people off benefits into work, that gives you two sorts of benefits. It reduces the welfare bill. It also generates taxes from people actually working. That's, I think, got to be at the centre of what's done. Now, there are a few other areas where I think not everyone will agree with me, but I find it bizarre, given the state of affairs we're in, that we have an overseas aid budget that's actually ring-fenced, protected. I wouldn't be going down that route at all. Very difficult, of course, because lots of people I know disagree with me, but...
Well, I agree with you. I don't believe in ring-fencing expenditure. I'm also very concerned that we are still in this mindset, though the Chancellor touched on a challenge to it, that more spending automatically means better services. Whereas actually the NHS has got a lot more money, but it's using it less productively.
Yes.
These scandals in procurement expenditure in the Ministry of Defence go on and on and on.
Yes.
And that just spending more money is not the route to success. Spending it well is what matters.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And when I heard the Chancellor talk about these wonderful-sounding IT projects that are going to revolutionise productivity in the NHS, frankly, my heart sank. I mean, the mixture of the current unreformed NHS and IT projects, to me, that just spells failure.
Well, John Redwood made an excellent speech following the budget where he said productivity of the NHS is significantly below where it was pre-pandemic. I think you said 6 to 7%. When they didn't have this new IT.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be easier to try and get back that 6 and 7% before you start spending money, and that the spend to save in this instance may come at a later stage, but actually you can get the savings without spending at this point?
Well, I absolutely agree with that. We all know that there are bits of the NHS which are really wonderful. I've benefited myself. Really wonderful. There's also massive inefficiency. And we can't simply go on pretending that this is the envy of the world and we stick with the current structure. Now, I will understand the political constraints for a Conservative government, but really it is deeply disappointing at this stage to be going on just pouring more money into it. It simply has to be reformed.
Well, I agree with that, and the only person who's saying it is Wes Streeting.
I know.
Although when I praise him, I think it's rather embarrassing for him, but I think what he's saying is very interesting. Anyway, thank you both, Helen and Roger. Coming up next, these budget changes have prompted speculation about a May election, admittedly mainly from the Labour Party, but will the changes be enough to swing the polls? Plus, does the NHS need even more of your money?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
People in this field and they talk about mental health assistance, and I know from personal experience within my own family circle that the help is just not there.
I know that with speaking to many families who've got autistic children and adults. They are really struggling at the moment, whether it's to do with education, getting a diagnosis. You know, once they get to 18 to 25, where's the help? There isn't the help there with social care. You know, I just set up a petition as well, who's going to look after my sons when I'm no longer around? Because that's that's the story and the question that's at the back of every parent's mind. It's just so hard at the moment, and lots of small charities are closing. And for me, they're the backbone of the society, because they're the ones that speak, you know, to parents continually all the time, or autistic adults. So,
and why has it to be that way? And, you know, we'll get government minister after government minister coming on and saying, we have greatly added to the resource here. We've had another 2.5 people we've hired last year, and whatever. They twist statistics and they make it all sound good. But I know from the work I do in the charitable world, and I know from people who I know personally, it just isn't there. So stop telling it is. And the thing is, the demand for mental health care has just ballooned.
The earlier you start working with children who are autistic, the better the outcomes. I've seen it myself, and I know it with my own sons. I shouldn't have had to set up a school and remortgage my home, you know, for my boys. And so many parents are still struggling, like 20-odd years from when my boys were diagnosed, and they're saying it's improving, and we're talking about awareness, we're talking about acceptance. It's hard because I'm juggling caring, I'm juggling, you know, taking him to college, picking him up. You know, I'm running a charity, I'm doing events. I know I'm a workaholic, but I'm very passionate and I'm very driven.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. You won't be surprised to know we've been talking about the budget and you've been sending in your mail mogs. Robert says, as a pensioner, there was nothing in the budget for me. Other increases such as council tax will mean I will be worse off. So why should I vote Conservative? You should vote Conservative because you are a good, loyal gentleman and you like to stick to the party. David, I don't want a tax cut. I want the money we already pay to be spent properly and without waste. That would be worth infinitely more than a tax cut. Well, I agree with that. And if we did that, we could then afford a tax cut. Today's budget changes, including the 2% cut to national insurance and the increased funding to the NHS, prompted some speculation about a May election. Mainly, it has to be said, from the Labour Party. I happen to think it's unlikely, as it's not clear that the budget will improve the Tories' election chances spectacularly. In my view, good economics leads to good politics, and that budget fireworks tend to lead to remarkably little difference. But there's no doubt that some of these measures were implemented with a general election in mind. I'm very pleased to be joined now by Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor, and Charlie Rowley, former advisor to Michael Gove and to Theresa May. Thank you very much both for coming in. It's obviously in the Labour Party's interest to say, why didn't you go straight to an election? But looking at it as a political specialist, do you think this is devised as an election budget or is more a steady-as-she-goes budget?
Well, the logic for a May election is that things can only get worse, you know. So actually the idea of staunching the bleeding, going early, maybe saving a few seats that perhaps otherwise not be saved, you know, not having a summer of the boats arriving on the south coast of England and all the rest of it would be to go for May. There might be enough in the budget just to suggest that still, I think. And yeah, you are, of course, right. Labour is ramping up the rhetoric on a May election to put the pressure on, but I think it still remains a live option.
Charlie, if you were still advising in government, would you have been advising this type of a budget? Is it trying to give the impression of a competent government that knows what it's doing and doesn't go for pyrotechnics? Or are there things in it like the 2p cut in national insurance that are meant to be saying, look, we are the election party?
I think that's right. I think the 2p cut as well, with sort of freezing beer duty, with freezing fuel duty, things that really matter to people, particularly with cost of living, along with the idea that inflation is coming down and the OBR projections that inflation will come down to that 2% Bank of England target rate. So it says that, you know, this is a Conservative government that is doing what it says it's going to do, but it's also not going to take risks and therefore put the economy at risk and put people's cost of living up. But so it's steady as she goes for now, but there could be more things to come in the future.
But Charlie, on the fuel and the beer, all he's done is not put it up. I mean, that's not exactly a vote-winning strategy, is it? To have put it up would have been a catastrophe, and not to put it up is just, you know, par for the course. So it wasn't really a giveaway budget, was it?
But I think it's just sensible politics and rationale to say, look, you know, we have been able to find the room to freeze things. That is going to be helpful to people, and couple that with inflation coming down, something that the government is obviously it's one of its top 5 priorities, and it is achieving in that regard. That is going to help with the cost of living.
But Paul's got a very good point, hasn't he, that people have now taken for granted that the fuel freeze will remain. It's now many years since fuel went up on the fuel escalator.
Literally, isn't it?
It's still in the ABR's figures, but nobody expects it. And the Labour Party, if it were in government, wouldn't raise fuel duty either.
Find that astonishing if they did, yeah.
So it's not a sort of big positive. But you mentioned inflation. If inflation gets back on target, how quickly do you think the Bank of England will cut interest rates?
Well, just on the fuel duty, I mean, Sadiq Khan has slapped a tax on motorists through ULEZ in London, so it's hard not to suggest that they're going to do that right across the country, which they could do. So if Labour come in, your fuel duty, your fuel bills, your petrol bills could go up.
So it makes it an election distinguisher.
That's what's known as a Freudian slip-up.
Yes, I think that's right, because the choice of the election will obviously be between Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister or Rishi Sunak, and you either want to see the policies that Conservative government is implementing versus what perhaps a London Labour mayor is doing, or what is happening in Wales, for example.
Hang on a minute, that's not the right comparison. I mean, I get the politics of that, but we're not going to get a ULEZ slapped on Gloucestershire, are we? Let's face it.
Well, we don't know. But the only way to guarantee that you're not going to get that is by having a Conservative government, because it's not going to do it.
Well, Bristol has done one, so which is right next door to Gloucestershire. So you, with a Labour West of England mayor, and it had a Labour mayor of Bristol. They fell out with him, so they abolished him. But that's probably much too much local politics. I want to come back to interest rates, because do you think interest rate cuts, if they come, could be fundamental to the electoral prospects of the Conservatives, and that if inflation's within target, it's hard for the bank not to do them, but it puts the bank right in the political firing line, doesn't it?
Yes.
Cutting rates 6 months before an election?
It does, and I think I am reminded of that wonderful moment when Ronald Reagan was debating Jimmy Carter and just sort of turned to him in 1980 and he said, you know, do you feel better off? And I think no matter what the OBR says and even what the bank says, it's how people are feeling is what will be the determinant of the election in many of the seats, and people don't feel better off, and they look around at the potholes and the fact they can't get a dentist and the trains don't work and this general sense that nothing works and everything is broken. I think that's more fundamental to voting behaviour than actual forecasts.
But there were some pretty good figures that Jeremy Hunt came out with, the 800 jobs every day during the period of majority Conservative government.
People have got jobs, but they're working harder and longer than ever for either flatline or even less wages, fewer amounts of money. And some people are working 2 or 3 jobs. So that's not the issue. The issue is, do you feel better off for working hard? And people don't.
Charlie, do you think this is going to be at the heart of the election?
I think there'll certainly be an element of that. Being the cost of living is something that people really care about. That's the top outcome in every focus group. But I think it's also about, where do taxpayers' money go? It's not the government's money, it's taxpayers' money. Agreed. And making sure that you have that public service productivity initiative that the Chancellor set out today to make sure that every government department is spending its money wisely is something that the public, I think, will really want to.
All governments always say that. And I just wonder whether £450 a year on average, what's that, just under £40 a month, makes sufficient difference to people for them to notice?
Well, it might not be, but that's why we may have another fiscal event in a few months' time before an election to say, because of the hard work in which the British economy has had to suffer, and the hard work of UK taxpayers and workers, and what the government has done to get inflation down and to grow the economy and do all the things it's going to do, or says it's going to do, it has been able to say...
You can't just keep having fiscal events. The economy is not fixed.
Well, why not?
And all those people whose mortgages are about to go off a cliff and have, £40 extra a month, people are going to be having mortgages going up hundreds and hundreds of pounds a month.
And I think
that's what they'll feel.
And that's a fair point. I think that's why this was a prudent budget, because obviously, look, I thought Liz had a lot of good policies in her when she was the Prime Minister and Kwasi was the Chancellor, but it went too far and too fast, and it was the wrong time, and that spooked the markets.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
That increased bill. So it's making sure this budget was prudent enough to make sure it's still steady as she goes, but when things are absolutely stable and when the economy is completely on track...
People do not want steady as she goes. They want change.
There'll be more to come.
People want change. Thank you, Paul and Charlie. Coming up, a new State of the Nation segment in which I'll be speaking to GB News viewers live from across the country. And don't forget, my pugnacious panel is waiting in the wings. We'll be touching on everything from Muslim war memorials to increased NHS spending.
Hi there, welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Yeah, there was some warm, sunny spells during Wednesday, but for many over the next 24 hours, it is going to be cloudy with an increased chance of showers developing through Thursday. We've got high pressure to the east. That's bringing a lot of low cloud into eastern parts. We keep the clear spells overnight in the south and the west. Where we do have the clear spells, there'll be a touch of frost and some fog patches forming. A few showers continuing across parts of Cornwall as well. Otherwise, many places will be dry. And we start the day with a bit of a chill in the air, certainly where we've got those frost and fog pockets in the west. But it will soon warm up. The cloud will lift as well, and actually with the rising cloud, it's going to be a brighter day across northeastern parts of the UK. Still a lot of cloud, and that cloud bubbling up, some sharp showers will develop, particularly through the Midlands, East Wales, into later on parts of northern England. Away from the showers, though, plenty of dry and bright weather, best of the sunshine in the west and southwest, highs of 12 or 13 Celsius, although still a chill in the east. And it's going to be increasingly breezy through Thursday and into Friday. That breeze coming from the east will make it feel on the cold side, but increasingly sunny spells will develop in the south on Friday. And it's going to be largely dry. Same can't be said for the weekend. Increasingly spells of showery rain will move north across the country. 8 Celsius in the north, 12 further south.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Well, welcome back. We've been talking about the politics of the budget. And Paul says, Dear Jacob, you should be Chancellor of the Exchequer. If you had been since 2010, this country would be wealthier, more efficient and happier. Paul, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for that. Darryl says, you say you must improve productivity, but your government has closed down our steelworks, so we have to buy steel from China. And we're on the edge of a war with Russia. Darryl, this green policy we have is madness and has been closing down our manufacturing industry, and we need to get away from it. Now it's time for a new State of the Nation Vox Populi Vox Day segment, where we speak to real people, rather than the holograms that you see in the studio, about today's budget. One of the many problems we have with our fiscal policy is that it's so heavily governed by self-imposed rules that are policed by the Office for Budget Responsibility, something Patrick Minford pointed out last night. There is also much to be criticised about the complexity in our tax system. Well, I'm joined now by State of the Nation viewer and joinery and carpentry business owner, Philip Aldous from Portsmouth. Philip, what do you think of the budget? What would you have liked to have seen that you didn't see, and what are you pleased about?
Free. There's so much red tape and restriction. If you let people do their own thing, self-determination, business will grow. And as you know, if a system creates cash, creates jobs, then creates tax. And that then goes back into the economy, then the government can spend your taxes and build a better economy, better public services. There's too many restrictions. You know what I mean? It's too claustrophobic.
And you've got a carpentry and joinery business. What are the regulations? Is it the VAT regulations that bother you? Is it rates? What are the things that hit you particularly?
I stay under the VAT regulation because you're working in private homes, and once you put VAT 20%, they go somewhere else. So it just stops your business. You know what I mean? Insurance goes up. So if you take up 5%, it goes up 15%. It's just an add-on. Small add-ons become larger add-ons. Obviously, you've got the green issue. Timber's become very expensive because of the deforestation. A lot of timber comes from North America. Then the MDF, if 8x4 sheets, then prices have skyrocketed. Some have doubled in the last 2 years. Some say it's due to the pandemic. I think some of it's profiteering. If you go to different outlets, they all seem to give the same price. There's no competition anymore. That's a big problem.
But are you finding that supply chains have recovered post-COVID, or are there any difficulties with those, or any duties that you're having to pay?
No, all supply lanes are back up and running. You sometimes get a small delay where shipment is. Obviously, we've got problems out in the Red Sea now, but generally most products are in stores, in warehouses. That problem has gone. There is a price increase. We know when in April, apparently, again, I was told today, I picked up material today. But I'm a Conservative voter, and I vote Conservative because you believe in business. You believe on entrepreneurship. You want people to go out and create businesses. And at the moment, it's flatlining.
All right. Well, that's very important, Philip. Thank you for giving your view and explaining why you think that as a Conservative. My next guest has pointed out that one of the huge costs the budget has to take into account is net zero spending. Just one example I mentioned yesterday, we are planning to spend £20 billion on carbon capture technology, which is still in its experimental stages. Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by Peter Miller, a retired geologist from Ascot. Peter, thank you for joining me. You're a geologist, so you understand all about global warming. You have scientific expertise, and yet you're concerned about the money that's being spent on green policies.
Well, I think you'll find that the most climate sceptical group of people in the world are geologists, because for one reason, as you said, we understand what happened to climate in the past. We are obsessed with climate change. but climate change has been something which has happened for the last 4 and a bit billion years. So if we apply it to what's happening to us today, we have an insane energy policy. The consumer has to fork up, I think, 14 to 15 billion pounds this year. That's over 500 pounds per additional household. And what we should really be doing, if you wanted to make the economy grow and to make people happier and more likely to invest, is we should lower energy prices. And a very simple way to do that would be for the government to take on board all these green taxes, 14 billion pounds a year. Lowering energy prices would involve more expenditure by people in the economy. And more to the point, it would encourage companies to invest in new industry. And I think when we look at what's happened today in the budget, there was no concept of trying to encourage enterprise. There was no concept of trying to introduce sensible energy policies. It was just the same old, same old.
But don't we need some new green technologies to reduce our emissions? Does that matter?
Well, you have to remember this carbon dioxide thing is grossly overstated. For example, in the UK, the amount of CO2 we produce is less than what the increase is in China every year. And we produce less than 1% of the world's CO2. And so whatever we do in this country doesn't matter one little brass farthing. It just doesn't matter. And yet we're obsessed with
thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. As a geologist, you may be interested to know that William Smith, the father of geology, started his work in High Littleton in my constituency, a fact of which I am very proud. With me now to discuss this further is my pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the historian and broadcaster, Tessa Dunlop. Now, Tessa, you were making funny noises whilst Peter was speaking. I couldn't help hearing. So I get the impression that you want lots of green charges on the economy to make us inefficient.
I'm very pro GB News being the people's channel, but you only talk to certain people. You've managed to find the one geologist who's a total climate denier, who actually denies something that was proven in the 19th century, that actually carbon dioxide heats up. If I pump carbon dioxide into a room, it will naturally become a hotter room.
You're being very unfair on him. He said we're only responsible for 1% of the emissions. So even if we went to zero, it won't make a blind bit of difference. So why should we punish ourselves when the rest of the world isn't following?
That's like...
it's like saying something perfectly sensible, isn't it?
No, it's like going to a knife crime conference and saying, look, those guys have big zombie knives and I only kill with a dagger, so I'm going to keep mine out just in case he kills me with a zombie knife. I mean, the point is we live in a shared planet.
But never mind.
Indeed, well, I'm not wearing them just because I don't want to threaten you in any way, Jacob. Actually, I've had rather a good financial day.
Oh, good. Tell me.
Well, I also feel very flattered. Unlike Kelvin, who's a pensioner, I was being directly wooed by Jeremy Hunt. I'm one of the 150 or so thousand families who are in the upper income bracket that had our child benefit taken away from us, and that has now been reinstated. Threshold used to cap out at 60,000, it's now gone up to 80,000. So midway through Jeremy Hunt, I silenced the television and I rang up the HMRC, and I'm going to be £170 richer a month. And I have to say two things. One, no, it won't make me vote for you. And two, do I look like I am the most needy cause in broken Britain today?
But you got through to HMRC, so public services seem to be working.
40 minutes waiting.
Do you know what? What a miserable life you lead. You get given 170 a month, you know, and even then you're not happy with it. The truth about the matter is, 400 billion went out on COVID. We've never recovered from that. 400 billion, if we handed out 400 billion today, one of the things that would definitely happen is that national insurance could be got rid of immediately, and we could cut a taxation by about 6 or 7p. Fantastic. These things happen. This government is sitting there. The idea that Starmer would have a better idea, the thing that makes me laugh is that all this is going to Starmer's account. From the second that Starmer takes over, the problems will look 10 times worse, because he starts handing out to the unions and he starts doing God knows what else to the country. So the socialists are done for, and actually the problem is that we're going to end up with about 200 seat Labour majority. I still have some hope that that will reduce slightly, because I am absolutely sure, and I agree with your SPAD that you had before, he's going to have a massive giveaway in October, and stamp duty and inheritance tax may disappear.
All right, come on,
Reinforce your base. Don't give it all to Tessa.
Quite extraordinary on a budget day, and this is something like the 14th budget that the Conservatives have overseen, that you're attacking Keir Starmer.
But
the Labour Party are not culpable for the mess we are in
Explain to me,
today.
with our economy caused by 400 billion of money going out the door, what is it that Starmer's going to do that's going to transform your family's future and mine?
Well, mine has already been transformed today, as we've ascertained, by £170. But the non-dom idea, attacking their own Prime Minister, no less, was directly stolen from the Labour Party.
It was the worst idea in the budget. It's the worst idea in the budget. Anyway, thank you to my panel.
Are we being silenced?
We are, because we are coming back. We've got more to talk about. It's coming up. The Chancellor's increased funding for the National Health Service, even though it was already receiving record funding. Was that the right move? Plus, £1 million for a Muslim War Memorial has been promised, and we'll be discussing that as well. Thank you very much.
On Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, is Priti Patel impressed by Jeremy Hunt's budget?
I'll say it, you know, we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. That is a fact. Taxes are too high. Taxes have been going up.
And?
However, these people should be incarcerated for the crimes that they committed, and they should not be allowed back in the community. End of story.
Don't miss my exclusive interview with the former Home Secretary. And is this Las Vegas dominatrix going to post nude pictures of Prince Harry on OnlyFans? Don't miss Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 to 11 p.m. Be there.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So after his mad dash to see his father last week, Prince Harry predictably went on TV to talk about it. He gave his first interview to Good Morning America, whilst apparently being filmed by a cruise that were doing a documentary on the Invictus Games. He didn't disclose his father's diagnosis, but frankly, even the fact that he was on TV talking about it was concerning. No wonder they're keeping him at arm's length. This is what he said.
How did you get the news that the king was ill?
I spoke to him.
And what did you do next?
I jumped on a plane and went to go and see him as soon as I could.
How was that visit for you emotionally?
Look, I love my family. The fact that I was able to get on a plane and go and see him and spend any time with him, I'm grateful for that.
An illness in the family can have a galvanizing or sort of reunifying effect for a family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible in this case?
Yeah, I'm sure. Throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. The strength of the family unit coming together.
He also said that he loves his family, but then he said that he had his own family in America. So which family does he love? The late Queen's last few years of life were marred with accusations of racism, which Harry later backtracked on, claiming that they hadn't actually used the word, so inadvertently admitting to gaslighting us all. But the Sussex's stock is falling in the States, and the only thing that makes them interesting is their proximity to the royal family. And now the king is ill, Harry has even offered to muck in and take on official duties to help his father. Look, I want to see reconciliation and love and joy, but I'm afraid Meghan has yet to even speak to her father as far as we know, and Harry didn't apparently even reach out to his brother. Whilst his dad might fall for it, I doubt William will be as soft. Good luck with that, Harry.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, thank you for staying with us. We've been discussing all sorts of things, the ABR, net zero, tax simplification, and you've been sending in your views. Mark has been watching too much Dad's Army. He says the UK is doomed. There will be no growth in the UK as energy costs are ridiculously high. I agree. The net zero madness will cripple any growth and future for the UK. Well, I agree on the net zero madness. Paul, it was the Tories' last chance to claw back support and they've blown it. The sensible ideas that you mentioned on your show would have made a big difference, but they are so out of touch, they don't get it. I didn't write that myself. Today's budget include increased money for the National Health Service in the form of £2.5 billion to help cut waiting lists. The Chancellor also announced a new productivity plan, but there are serious questions about whether the problems of the NHS can be solved with more money, as it was already at record funding prior to these further increases. Well, my panel is still with me, Kelvin McKenzie and Tessa Dunlop. Kelvin, if you give more money to the NHS, does it lead to a better service?
Well, not so far. I mean, it's had more money than any other significant industry almost in the world. I think it employs more people than the Chinese army. And I'm not saying they do a bad job, but it is a job where all you ever hear about is complaints about it. For ordinary people trying to get to see your GP is a really cunning idea. Do you go and present yourself, or do you stay on the line, or you're number 12? And very cleverly, they've started saying, we'll call you back without you losing your place in. This is the point of impact. And so people say, well, actually, do you know what? The NHS isn't working. I don't go quite that far. But what I would like to know is, what is it about our country that says we love a monopoly and we love a trade union that runs a monopoly? Oh, yes, it's the NHS. Why don't we start having health-based insurance which you can put against tax?
I don't want the American system. I don't want the American system. What I don't understand...
What about the Australian system?
Do you know, let's stick with the British system and let's follow through.
Why should we do that, Tessa?
Jeremy Hunt used to be the Minister for Health when he promised he was going to computerise the system. That was the deal, so we wouldn't get... I was in my local hospital just last week, an elderly woman from Brixton. She was 84 years old, in pain. She had that many letters in her hand, appointments that come through after arriving in our rubbish postal service after the time when she's meant to have the appointment. When was computerisation meant to happen? Because he reintroduced it today,
Jacob. I say Gordon Brown was going to do it, and what was it? £10 billion was spent on a computer system that failed, or was it 18 billion? It was an enormous amount of money.
But we've now had our Chancellor reintroduce the system he's already introduced.
All right, but we've got to move on to our next subject. This is rapid fire this evening, because one of the smaller projects to be included in today's budget was £1 million for a Muslim war memorial to honour the Muslims who died in the First and Second World War in the service of freedom and democracy. So in light of the latest concerns about social cohesion and extremism, is this an important gesture to show that Muslims are an important part of our history? Well, my panel are with me, and fortunately Tessa is a great expert on war memorials.
Indeed.
I think this is fantastic because it's a reminder that in the First World War and indeed the Second World War, the whole empire came together. It wasn't just Blighty, it was the whole of the British Empire.
It was the whole of the British Empire. It's worth remembering that in 2002 we had the Memorial Gates, which celebrated the role of Commonwealth soldiers in both those wars. The late Queen opened those gates. But if we won't want to say, well, that includes everybody, you could then say, but hang on a minute, why is there a fantastic Sikh soldier who stands proudly in Leicester, a memorial to Sikh contribution, several to the Gurkhas, the memorial garden for the Holocaust that's been planned, over £100 million pledged by the Conservative government, yet to be greenlit for Victoria Tower Gardens, and yet nothing for the 1.5 million Muslims who died. I would argue, though, at the moment, most Muslims are more concerned with our government failing to do enough about Muslims dying today in Gaza than those who died yesterday.
But I think honouring our fallen is the duty of the government. The government can't necessarily do a lot about what's happening in Gaza, but the British Empire, and particularly people coming from the Indian subcontinent in both world wars, was really very remarkable and perhaps something we haven't talked about enough.
Yes. Look, it's an unfortunate time that we're going to be celebrating the Muslims who have fallen. After all, there will be people who could say, well, why don't we have a memorial to the people who have been killed by Muslims in our country over the last 20 years, for instance. So I am not against this, but what I do worry about is why do we have to keep sectioning off the religious aspects of our society? Why don't we just include the Muslims with the Christians, with the Sikhs? Why do we have to individualise them? There has been more bloodshed over religion than almost any other particular aspect of any wars in the world. So I would like to see that. Actually, if you had to actually ask me, I would prefer it didn't happen. And why doesn't the Muslim population, the Christian population, every population come together and say that memorial represents us all?
But aren't the Muslims, particularly in the First World War, very remarkable who were fighting for us? Because they were fighting against the Ottoman Empire. They were fighting against the Muslim Empire.
It doesn't matter why they were fighting for us. They were fighting for us. And as I keep on saying, it doesn't matter what religion you are. Let's have a collective
But I didn't
memorial.
hear you get this excited about the Holocaust Memorial Centre that's been proposed and that the Conservative government are doing everything they can to facilitate.
To put in completely the wrong place. It's a terrible place.
Yes, I agree with you, but they're trying to bulldoze all planning regulations. I just want
We've got to talk to Patrick. So sorry to my panel. We could go on for much longer. Patrick, what have you got on your bill of fare this evening?
Well, Dame Priti Patel tees off on the budget, on grooming gangs and on Shamima Begum. I'm talking about the bottomless pit that is our NHS. Anglophobia is a massive problem and it needs addressing. And are we about to see a naked Prince Harry online?
The mind boggles. I don't think we want to see that at all. But I fear that Dame Priti and I don't agree on Shamima Begum. And as I think Priti is one of the best politicians in the country, I'm always sorry when I don't agree with her. Patrick, that will, as always, be a brilliant programme. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 8. You should have forgotten Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation, and you're waiting for the weather in Somerset. But you know it's going to be absolutely lovely, the best anywhere, not just in England, but in the world.
A brighter outlook with Vox Solar, sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hi there, welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Yeah, there was some warm, sunny spells during Wednesday, but for many over the next 24 hours, it is going to be cloudy with an increased chance of showers developing through Thursday. We've got high pressure to the east. That's bringing a lot of low cloud into eastern parts. We keep the clear spells overnight in the south and the west. Where we do have the clear spells, there'll be a touch of frost and some fog patches forming. A few showers continuing across parts of Cornwall as well. Otherwise, many places will be dry. And we start the day with a bit of a chill in the air, certainly where we've got those frost and fog pockets in the west. But it will soon warm up. The cloud will lift as well, and actually with the rising cloud, it's going to be a brighter day across northeastern parts of the UK. Still a lot of cloud, and that cloud bubbling up, some sharp showers will develop, particularly through the Midlands, East Wales, into later on parts of northern England. Away from the showers, though, plenty of dry and bright weather, best of the sunshine in the west and southwest, highs of 12 or 13 Celsius, although still a chill in the east. And it's going to be increasingly breezy through Thursday and into Friday. That breeze coming from the east will make it feel on the cold side, but increasingly sunny spells will develop in the south on Friday. And it's going to be largely dry. Same can't be said for the weekend. Increasingly spells of showery rain will move north across the country. 8 Celsius in the north, 12 further south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're springing into spring and giving you the chance to win the seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won, plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package to enjoy, including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For your chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 £145 in tax-free cash, text GB-WIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing